Got a lot done around the house today.
Yes, we did. I woke up a little late, though.
You feel good to sleep in?
Yeah, 10:30 feels amazing.
10:30. Oh, and you only got up because I woke you up.
No. Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Milo, Olivia's dad, and it's my job to make sure that she is up by 10:30.
Yeah.
You were out when I went into your bedroom this morning.
Well, you know what? I was resting.
You've been running pretty hard.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Olivia's senior in high school, doing great.
Going to all the parties.
Going to all the late night benders and things like that. But you also got a job, part-time job. And when you're not doing that, you're at Bible study or some leader meeting or babysitting a friend of ours, kids. And
that's true.
You're running around all over the place.
So it felt amazing.
Yeah.
And then I love it when Dad comes in. He's like, "You ready?"
Yeah, because we had some projects to
We
get
did. And I had no excuses to get out of it. And I was grateful to help him. He didn't give me hard duties.
And you did good.
Thanks.
Okay, so today's April.
Yes.
Happy April.
Happy April.
And April is?
The month of the military child.
So what we thought we would do is talk about this, since you are a military child.
Yes.
And so there may be some folks, I was thinking about this, there may be some folks listening to this podcast that are unfamiliar with what it's like to be a military kid. And so might not have interest in this subject because maybe they don't know any. Which I would argue, if you're listening to this podcast, we've introduced you to Olivia. Now you know a military child, so that excuse no longer exists.
Woo!
But what I, you mentioned this when we were laying out our episode planning session, and which I thought was great to talk about this, because we're going to kind of talk about this as what it's been like as a family, how we've navigated this, and what it's like to live with a kind of a sense of purpose and live with a sense of mission, not because my orders say that, or because the mission is given to us by the commands that we have served, but because of what the Lord has called us into. So first thing we want to kind of lay out, just, up front, is that you and I have freedoms today.
Yes, we do.
We all have these freedoms because other people sacrificed for us. And oftentimes I think when we talk about that, we think of those that have died on the battlefield, which is obviously, we need to honor those sacrifices, and at the appropriate times take memory and honor those folks. But sometimes the folks that we don't consider are the spouses and the kids that have gone without a parent, have gone without a spouse for extended periods of time, to ensure that we have the freedom that we have today. One of the great things, in fact, your mom and I last week were at a retirement ceremony for a sailor who retired after 20 years in the military. And it's in those moments that if you ever have the opportunity to go to a military retirement ceremony, I highly encourage it, because it's a great opportunity, one, to honor those that are retiring, but then also it's a really good reminder kind of to zoom out and go, here's the big things in life that actually matter. Family is what matters. The relationships, some measure of the look at the scope of accomplishments that have taken place, how people have learned over that extended period of time. But today we want to specifically talk about the kind of the nuances that surround military kids. And this may apply to, I was thinking, this may even apply to other folks, like missionary kids, or kids that, oftentimes are referred to as third culture kids, kids that they are in a culture or in a community that is not where they're from. And so they're but not, right? And so it's this different thing. When you think of all of this, I noticed you put something in the notes here.
I did.
What are your thoughts about military kids?
military kids live exceptional lives that require a work of service and a discipline to their family, friends, and community.
Why'd you put that?
Well, okay, so military kids, so from my perspective, when my dad gets orders, when my dad is given this duty, I have no say. But my job as a dependent is to support you, because this is God's new ministry in your life, to support my mother, who's like, go Milo, but also we need Milo. And then when we're fine, but I have friends who their parents are deployed, it's my job to support them.
Yeah.
And I think when there's people in your lives who relate to you on some level, it's really easy to support each other.
Sure.
But it's not as common to get support from other people from outside of that community. Does that make sense?
What would be an example of that?
So you have like your church life. I go to church with kids who have lived here their entire lives. And they don't see that as, sure, we have church in common, but our lives and the way our families function are completely different. And they might not see the need I need. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And so military kids live exceptional lives, like out of the ordinary from the normal perspective. Given my definition of normal right now is kids who have lived in the United States their whole life and have no relationship to the military.
Okay, so that's an interesting comment that you just made, because you just said normal as in kids who live in the United States.
Yeah.
Some people would be like, what? No, normal is people who live in the same town their entire lives. not just the same country, right? The little bit of stats that we could dig up around all of this.
Yeah.
A military person, depending on their rank and position, there's a variety of factors, obviously, but a military person will move every 2 to 3 years. And so that's their family moving. On average, right? There's always exceptions, and sometimes it's more, or they're moving more than that. And so if you just kind of on average take kind of that sort of notion, then you will be moving over the course of 20 years or 18 years, 6 to 7 times, right? Which is exhausting. Since your mom and I have been married, we've moved 9 times. And, are kind of, it's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
When the typical person moves 3 times in those 18 years. So in fact, there was one article I was reading where, so you got a young couple, they get married, they have their first place, they have their first kid, and they might not move until that kid's about 4 or 5, because then they're starting to think about, is this where we want to live because of the schools?
Yeah.
So they'll move, generally speaking, they'll move to a place where that kid, will be in a better school system or something like that.
And sometimes it's just down the road, or maybe to a different state, or for whatever reason.
Or for whatever reason. And then they'll move again, sort of like junior high-ish period, because oftentimes one of the spouses will be advancing in their career, and it'll be more of a career-driven move. And maybe at that point, they've also had more kids, and so they need a little bit bigger house. And then maybe there will be one more move that will be related to employment things. But on average, that's kind of it. And sometimes, like you and I have known folks that have moved down the road. Like they moved, but it was, across town or something like that. It wasn't like they were moving out of state.
Which is totally fine. Like, we're not.
Okay, yeah, so that's one of the things we want to lay out. Like, this is not a better or worse than, right? We're just kind of, the situation is military kids live with a tremendous amount of transition. So, they move. That means they're probably moving away from friends. They're probably moving into a new school. They're moving into a new church. They're moving into a new neighborhood. They're having to, learn all of the, things that community has to offer. Where do you go shopping? What are the stores that are in this area? You know, like all of that stuff is brand new information. When to a lot of the folks that are in that community, that's common information. It's not new. It's not challenging. It's not difficult. This is just how things are.
Yeah.
No, that's how things are in this community, but maybe the community I came from, that's not how things were. So in light of that, because we've moved a little bit, let's kind of talk about our journey as a military family. Because I haven't been in the Navy that long. I've been in for 10 years. Started off as a reservist, and I was a pastor at Grace Chapel in Wilsonville at the time. So up until that moment, I had been a pastor for about 16 years. Joined the reserves, did that for a couple years. So now I'm 38? No, 40.
I feel like you joined like late 30s.
I joined in my late 30s. I was 38 when I commissioned as an officer, but as a reservist. And then I went through the training pipeline, and we felt the Lord leading us to go active duty. Do you remember that time?
I do.
What do you remember?
Well, for context, whenever my dad breaks news to us, we're always eating, I feel like.
Oh, really?
We're always in a particular environment other than home. Now that I think of that.
Okay, I'm looking over our...
Maybe not one of them, but...
Okay.
So when we were going active duty, I knew what it meant, and because Dad had described to us and had thrown out ideas like, oh, what if I went active duty? And I was just like, no, bruh. And I was in a school system where I had already done kindergarten through 4th grade. My brother had done kindergarten through 6th grade there, I think. Yeah. So we already had a community. My dad was a pastor at a church. Our grandparents were down the road. Aunts, my aunt and uncle and cousins were just 10 minutes down the road. Like, our whole world was like right there. And when my dad was like, you know what if we just like move? Like, who wants to say, yes, that's what I want to do. Let's do it. And, I have no experience really moving by that point, maybe down the road, but just to completely uproot. So he told us we were in Disney World. Well,
that's when we knew where we were going.
Oh, that's true. Active duty, we were at Cece's Pizza.
In South Carolina.
Yeah, when he had just finished his chaplain school.
So for the chaplain schoolhouse for the Navy was in South Carolina at the time. And you and your mom had come out. Well, and my parents, they had all come out for the graduation ceremony. And then we went out to Cece's Pizza. Do you know why we went to Cece's Pizza?
I feel like Cece's Pizza was is it an East Coast, middle?
It's like a East Midwest.
Yeah, because they had one in Indiana where I was born, and that's where we would go. That was our pizza place.
Do you know why?
No.
Because it's super cheap.
Oh, the shocker. Shocker. I could have guessed that.
Yeah. So I told you guys at Cece's Pizza. And then when I turned in my package, got approved, living in Oregon at the time. And the detailer, that's what we call the person who tells us what our orders are going to be. They give us the details on orders. I asked him at the time, I said, hey, where do you think I'm going to go? And he said, well, right now I have empty billets, and I have 3 billets in Washington State that need to be filled.
I remember that.
And I was like, oh. He's like, so I'm not saying that's where you're going to go, but I have to solve that problem. I was like, roger that. So we took a trip. This is kind of my like, hey, let's have one big family vacation, fun time before we make this massive transition. And we went to Disney World and Universal Studios. And Andrew and I were on the Spider-Man ride, had just gotten off, and I got a phone call in the gift shop of the Spider-Man ride at Universal Studios, and got the news about where we were going to go. And then Andrew and I caught up with you and your mom because you guys were on other rides, and then we were getting ready to get on another ride, and your mom, she can always tell when my brain's in a different spot, and she's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "I got a phone call. I know where we're going." And she was like, "I'm not having you tell us while we are in line for the Poseidon water ride at Universal Studios." She says, "Wait." So after that ride, we went to Bubba Gump Shrimp Restaurant.
Mm-hmm. We were sitting at the table, and my dad was like, "So I know where we're going." And I just remember my heart dropping, like so by that point, I had been really praying for Washington State, because that was just...
Yeah, it's like 3 hours north.
Yeah, and I could do that. Like, sure, I'd have to move school systems, but I'm still close to family, and I'm still close to my cousins, and I'm still close to my friends. And I was like, I really thought that's where we were going. And I remember my dad was like, "You want to do some guesses?" So I just thought I'd say this. I was like, "Is it one of the 13 colonies?" Because I just learned about it. And you were like, "Oh, name them." So I went through all of them. And I remember you saying yes. And my heart dropped. And I was like, no. Like, to completely move across the nation.
Yeah, because we ended up going to North Carolina.
To a place that I had never even been to, or even a whole other community. It was just like absurd. And usually at these times, Dad breaks the news, I tend to get very emotional.
Yeah. So we were in North Carolina for a couple years, which was a good transition.
Yeah.
We homeschooled you kids, which I think was a good transition as well. I think that was good for you, and it was good for your mom. And then we got orders again. We were supposed to be there for 2.5 years. And then we ended up being there for barely 2.
Yeah.
And I remember telling you guys, I said, well, I've been offered Spain or Japan.
None of those seemed appealing to any of us. We were like, we barely made it over here.
And so then that night, I found out where we were going. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, I'll take you to a place where we will eat dinner is indicative of where we're going.
Yeah. So Andrew and I were really rooting for McDonald's. We were rooting.
Because that would mean we're staying in the States.
Right.
So we get in the car, and there was like a Japanese food restaurant we like to go to that was one direction. And then there was I found a Greece food, Mediterranean food place in another, and it was in the opposite direction. And I remember we pulled out, and I didn't turn towards
the right, the direction that McDonald's was, and the Japanese
place.
Yeah. We were at an intersection.
And do you remember your reaction?
I just started crying. And
it was more than crying.
Wailing.
It was closer to wailing. No!
We don't need to go that far.
It was.
I've moved on. Maybe not, but and
I was thinking, I'm really glad we're doing this in the car right now. I'm glad I didn't tell you this at the restaurant.
That would have been really bad.
And then we got to the restaurant, and then we had friends. Well, I had a friend who was in Spain. And I pulled up their Facebook feed, and I began to show you guys all the photos and what life was going to be like and the different places we would visit. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Did that console you at all?
No.
Okay.
And this is the part where Mom's trying to encourage me. Olivia, you get to learn how to speak Spanish. I don't want to speak Spanish. Mom's like, you get braces over there. I don't want braces. These are not great.
These are not incentives.
It sounds like parent incentives, not 6th grade me.
Yeah. Because, so at that age, 6th grade, what's your biggest concern?
Well, by that point, I had already been plugged in. See, it's right when you're plugged in and you're starting to root it. And we had a beautiful home. We had just gotten a new cat. And
it was a beautiful home because it was not a beautiful home when we got it. We had just finished remodeling it. Yeah, which I have a tendency to buy homes that need to be remodeled. So
this is craving.
Yeah. So everything was like root. You said you were like established.
And I had already I was at the point where I was at a youth group already. Like I wasn't in Sunday school anymore.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I was already being poured in by youth leaders and doing guitar lessons and doing all these middle school things. And then it's like, we're going to move to Europe. It's like, oh.
Here we go.
Yeah.
And then, so we were in Spain for 3 years. I was a chaplain at the chapel there. And then I went on to one of the ships. And that was, up to that point, the longest I'd been away from home was maybe a month.
Yeah. For like schooling or training.
Yeah.
Nothing that had to do with like life or death.
Not that. Yeah. There was a couple times you're probably not aware of, but there was.
Oh, thanks, Dad. Well.
But there was some. I wasn't gone for long periods of time, and in our world, a long period of time is like more than a month. Like, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Like anything less than that, does that seem long to you?
No.
Okay. Because I remember I had a friend of mine who was, we'd been in the middle, I think I was in Spain. And he posted a photo on his Facebook page, and it was his kids at the airport, like looking out the window. And he had copied his wife's post, and he says, I'll miss you guys. I'll be back before you know it. And his wife's post was saying goodbye to Daddy on his big trip. And so I messaged him and I said, hey, bro, where are you going and how long are you going to be gone for? Because the whole family went to the airport. Kids are, glued to the window. They're saying goodbye to Daddy's plane. He says, I'll see, must be a while. And he's like, well, I'm leaving today, which was a Monday. And he says, I'll get back really late Friday night. So it's a long trip. And I, which is like, I don't judge that, because that's their normal, but it's kind of like, oh, that's not the world we live in. And so when you think of military kids, that's not the world they live in. Like dad or mom being gone for 2 or 3 weeks
is nothing.
Is common. It's not. It's like, I got a trip coming up. How much have we talked about me being gone?
I forgot even when you were gonna leave. Like,
you'll find out the day before.
I was like, he's gonna be gone in half of April and he's gonna come back before May. Like, I don't like, it didn't really hit me. Yeah, when do you leave?
Mid-April.
Okay.
Yeah. So
we still have a little time.
Yeah. But then I left the chapel and I went on one of the ships there, and that's when I was gone a lot.
Yes.
So, what was that like for you guys, me being gone? Did you miss me? Because we were living on base at the time. We had a lot of other military families around us where they were accustomed to families being long, their mom or dad's being gone. So for you, was it a hard thing to go through? Was it not a hard thing?
It was.
For context, let me put this in context for folks. Over the course of not even 2 years, like 20 months, I was gone 357 days, like away from family. So kind of back to like, what was that like for you?
Well, when Dad joined the ship, I was a sophomore. I think I was going into my sophomore year. And then my brother was going into his senior year. Yeah. So I would say it hit my brother more than it hit me, because I was like, I have more years, because I knew our orders were short for you, for the ship, but not so much. I'd have more time with you after than Andrew would, but it was different. I feel like it would have been a lot harder if it was when I was younger. Because by this point, like, Andrew and I are like our own individual minded teenagers.
And you guys are pretty autonomous. Like you couldn't have driver's license in Spain because you have to be 18 or over.
We had a little moped.
But you had a moped.
Like 30 kilometers per hour, dude. You were flying.
You guys had a lot of freedom.
Go off base, go with friends.
Yeah, you had a really good set of friends there and things like that. So you had a pretty strong community around you. And I've wondered that for families, because like when I was gone a lot of that time, a lot of the folks that I was on the ship with, if they had families, their kids were little. Like they were not older children. And I thought that would be way harder for me as a father leaving. In some ways, like I felt like I could leave you guys because you were pretty self-sufficient. Your mom, is out. She's amazing.
Yeah.
It's not that I want to go as much as it is like, I know you guys have done a good job of bringing folks around you, but little ones, it's harder, I think. It's harder for them to grasp that, like, daddy or mommy's not leaving because I did something wrong or because they don't like me or because there's something better over there. It's like to communicate, hey, we're making the sacrifice because of the nature of what we do, which is to ensure freedom and democracy around the world. Freedom of the seas, like that's an abstract concept, right? A 4-year-old being able to grasp that is going to be very, very difficult. Okay, so, and then do you have anything else you want to say about that?
But it was challenging nonetheless. I mean, I think Mom took it the hardest out of all of us because Andrew and I were kind of like, we have school, we have other things.
You're busy.
Yeah, we have things. Mom loves people. Mom goes to hang out. Mom loves hosting. Mom revolves her life around us. So when we were occupied, Mom was like, I'm alone. So we had to occupy Mom.
Okay, that's an interesting thing to consider. Like when thinking about military kids, because I think sometimes it's, there's a load they carry in that home because one of the parents is gone.
Yep.
Or because their only parent is gone. Some kids don't have two parents.
It's true. It's very true.
Okay, and then and obviously we're back in the States now.
Yep.
Were you excited to get back to the States? Because we had a good time in Spain.
We did, but it was a good time we left because all of my friends were leaving.
Well, that's another thing, right? Because like your community is always changing.
Yes.
Particularly if you live on a military base, that community is not going to look the same in 4 or 5 years. The folks will rotate in and out. Okay, so now we're back stateside. You're ready to come back.
Yeah.
Because it was time.
It was.
Okay, so, when we were doing our prep, I tripped across this article that talked about if we're talking about military, April being the month for military kids, how do we honor them? And one of the things I kind of want to highlight really, really quickly, and then we can kind of go in the different ways you and I have been thinking about this. One of the things that is need to recognize is that honor and shame are honor's the antidote to shame, right? So if you feel, it's like, this is what I find fascinating. When you enter into relationships and you really feel like somebody's honoring you, like they're listening to you, they're weighing what you say, your walls come down. You don't feel like you have to keep secrets. You don't feel like you have to put on a facade. Do you know what I mean? Because you're experiencing that honor, that trust is being built. So if honor is the antidote to shame, we're going to talk about how to honor these kids here in a bit. But let's kind of talk about the shame piece that they may be inclined to believe. So the lies that a spirit of shame can breathe into folks that are going through the things that military kids are going through. One is, do you want to go back and forth with these? Do you have that notes up? The one is others can never understand what I'm going through. I'm the exception to the rule, which there's a part of that may be true in that others may not be able to understand, but to never understand, that's something different. Right. One is that others can never understand.
Another one could be like, I don't matter.
Yeah. Why? How have you seen that play out?
I've seen there's different dynamics within the military, like you've said. Like there's some that they're only dependent on one parent. I've known other family dynamics where it's a mother and then a stepfather, and they're both in the military, so that's a whole other dynamic. And the longer you move, I think the longer it's easier to not want to join a community, knowing you're going to move again.
Yeah.
And with that said, it's like, so really, I'm just here because they're here. So I have no say. I have no value. I'm dependent on them. I don't know who I am. I don't have friends. And it leads into a lot of these lies that you're participating in, because I think people are like, this is going to be the solution. And you can't, it's a really bad habit the longer you go thinking you know everything. So.
Another one is I don't belong. Which I think is everybody feels that when you step into some place that's new.
That's true.
To some degree. Now, because you might walk in and you might be, you know, the guest speaker. You might be the person everybody's anticipating. You might be, but any community always has some kind of insider language or insider unspoken customs that demonstrate. I don't understand those. I don't know what those customs. I don't know what that language is, and so therefore, I'm not entirely sure I belong here the way they belong here. And I think years ago, I heard a group of us were having a conversation. I don't remember what it was about. I think it was about it was a group of pastors, and we were talking about the power of like how do we get people plugged into the life of the church. And it was when I was at Grace Chapel, and Jake Schwing brought up a really good point. He said, you know, what's interesting when you think about the power of invitation, the most stressful moment on the first day of school is when?
Lunch.
Where am I going to sit? And you can walk into the cafeteria and you can go, I think I want to sit with those people. But generally speaking, you'll go to where you're invited.
That's true.
And so, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because maybe the people that are inviting you aren't the type of folks that would be good to be hanging out with, that you would want in your life. And then there could be folks that's like, no, this is great. These are the kind of people I want in my life. And so that longing to belong is deeply rooted within our souls.
Yeah.
And I don't think it ever goes away, regardless of your life circumstance.
And then the last one is the sacrifice, or the sacrifice isn't worth it. This move isn't going to be worth it. It's only going to be 10 months or not even 2 years or whatever the case may be. It's kind of anticipating that future again. Like, it's not going to be worth it.
Yeah.
And then the longer you believe that, the longer you're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah. And my dad being gone or my mom being gone, this isn't worth it. Moving again, it isn't worth it. It's like we moved and you're still bothered that we don't have what was lost in the move.
Family, friends, community.
Well, I was thinking more literally. Like your childhood books.
Oh, dude. Bro.
Like, you know, the books we read to you as kids growing up, you know, those things that kind of anchor your memories in that piece, and they're nowhere to be found, you know? So it like, that's a type of it's not a big sacrifice. I don't think anybody would go like, oh yeah, you know, I really sacrificed a lot
My childhood
books for my country because I lost my childhood books.
Yeah.
But it is a loss.
It
right?
is.
And you start kind of,
Olivia the pig books are out of the question.
we got to get those replaced.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, it shame, you know, the lies that shame will breed, it'll breathe into these things that others can never understand. I don't matter. I don't belong. The sacrifice isn't worth it. You and I this was your idea to do this podcast today, which I thought was a great idea. And then we did some research, and I don't want to throw any organizations under the bus, but it was really interesting how unpractical the information was out there on how to actually be helpful to military kids. A lot of it was fluff, I think.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to suggest to you is that this is based upon what we think would be valuable and helpful. So this is not coming from a study or anything like that, but somebody who's been in the Navy now for 10 years.
And from another military kid.
And we've worked with a ton of families, right? I've been at the chapel when the spouses have shown up because their spouses are deployed. Like, here's the things that we kind of have put together that we think would be valuable on how to honor, right? So if we want to make the antidote to shame, if the antidote to shame is honor, how do we honor these kids?
Yeah. So first of all, like, we want to offer words of encouragement based on who the military child is and then what you see in them.
What would be an example of that? Have you experienced that?
Yeah. Yes. So I would say in our church especially, there's a mix of military kids, kids who have lived here all their lives, some in between. And it's just this really...
Some in between.
Like, not it, like, who have moved or who know, you know what I mean?
They're like new to the area, but they're not necessarily military.
So yeah, so it's like this little diverse thing. But I think it's really evident who a military child is or not. I think for me, I can kind of...
You can spot them.
I can be like, So one of the things my dad said in a really long time, well, he said a really long time ago that I've always remembered, and it says, it's like, you need to learn to be interested instead of interesting. When you meet someone for the first time, don't talk about yourself. Don't put yourself on a pedestal. I mean, like, if the conversation ends that way, like, or it organically gets there, but, you know, learn to get the person you're talking to. Learn how to find a way to support them or encourage them, or...
And have it be related to who they are. Like,
yes.
Your brother, I don't know if you remember this story, but we took your brother to college, and we were in the gift shop because your mom wanted to get some gift merch. And we were talking, this person came around the corner and we were talking with him. Of course, your mom always tells everybody that we're in the military, right? She's like, well, yeah, our son's a student here. He's going to be in the military. Or he's going to be a student here. We're in the military. We just moved back to the States. Because we had literally, like, moved from Spain back to the States and rented a car and then drove your brother to college.
Yeah.
So we're just
It was
back.
a process.
Yeah. And this gal goes, oh, well, I'm a military brat. Do you remember this? Mm-hmm. And your mom goes, and I'm standing there, and your mom was like, oh, really? Where was your mom, dad? Where were they stationed? She goes, actually, I don't really remember, because my dad was in the military before I was born. So all of that was before I took place. But yeah, I know what it's like to be a military brat. And I remember like looking at this person going, I don't know why you're telling me any of this. Like this, I think you think this is a way to connect, or a way to be an encouragement, or a way to be like, oh, hey, cool, I get it. We admire those people,
Yeah.
or we like those people, or those, military kids are welcome here. Like, I think she was genuinely trying to, like, be kind.
Yeah.
But it wasn't honoring. Do you know what I mean? Because it was kind of that, like, you don't understand what we're talking about, which is fine. I don't need you to understand, but I'm not going to pretend you were a military brat, because you weren't. The years ago, I read something that said sincerity is always specific. And I think if your encouragement is to be actual encouragement, it needs to be specific. Like, hey, I saw you do this and I thought it was super cool, the way you were an encouragement, or the way I saw you do this, or I saw you do, man, that's fantastic. Like, what's your favorite thing about whatever? Like,
Yeah.
like being that actual encouragement. And that's the antidote. So we kind of paired these up with some of the shame things, right? That's the antidote. So offering words of encouragement is the antidote to others can never understand. Second thing you can do is celebrate their success and accomplishments. Find out what they have gotten good at. One of the things that I'm rather astonished at is how talented and gifted and accomplished a lot of military kids are.
For real.
But it will go unnoticed because maybe the community they've stepped themselves into doesn't investigate any of those things. And so what can you do to kind of come alongside that kid and be like, hey, this is super rad. And if you're like, how would I know that? How would I know what they're good at or what they've accomplished? Ask their folks.
Yeah.
People like to brag about their kids.
It's true.
Pull them, mom, dad aside and be like, hey, what have they accomplished that they're super proud of? And it doesn't have to be something that you value. It's something that they value, that they've accomplished. And then go like, hey, I heard this. Great job, bro. I heard that's awesome. You got any photos of it on your phone, or you got this or that? Man, I'd love to hear what that was like for you. People like to talk about the things they value. And when you celebrate the things that you don't get to accomplishment and success without choosing a set of values. And when you celebrate that, it makes a massive difference in somebody's heart. And the antidote to that, that's the antidote to I don't matter.
Right.
Because it's like, no, you do. And I see it. I see you. I see what you've gotten accomplished.
Yeah. And then another one is like, just invite them to belong. Like that could include parties or outings or like events, holiday parties, anything to get them, like get together with them.
A part of what's happening.
Right.
And I would say, don't just invite them to the party. Help them plug into the party.
That's good.
Because like I've been invited, quote unquote, invited to things, and you show up and you're like, I don't know anybody here.
And no one's talking to me.
So and it's like, and I get it.
Yeah.
I understand why no one's talking to me because nobody knows me. And that's fine. I get it. But this is awkward. And now I'm that person that I'm sitting, over in the corner by myself.
Chatting to myself.
Which is like, why am I here? And it's like, you're there because somebody invited you, but it's more than just the invitation. It needs to be that hospitality piece too.
Yeah.
Because like, I think of how the Brandles have invited you into stuff.
Oh, for sure.
You've taken trips with them and, yeah, which is great. Like they've invited you in, which is just fantastic.
I love them.
Yeah, they're good people. And again, that's the antidote to I don't belong.
Yeah.
A great example, one of the best I've ever seen do this. He taught me how to do this. Is Dave Ambrose. He was a pastor friend of mine, and when I'd watch him work the lobby of a church before a Sunday service, and he would find people that he didn't know, or that sometimes you can tell if somebody's new because they're kind of like looking at everything and evaluating everything. And he would go over and he would introduce himself, and then he'd get a little bit of conversation, and then he would grab somebody else who was a regular and be like, hey, Andrew, come here. I want to introduce you to Andrew. This guy, amazing. And so he would pump up Andrew and then be like, so this is John and Sarah, and they're brand new here. You got, Andrew's been coming here. How long you been here now? A couple of years now? Oh man, he'll be able to answer all your questions. In fact, he can help you find a place to sit. And like, Andrew's like, sure, okay, whatever, right? Like, it's not like he's quote unquote trained to do this, but he's been around long enough. And what I saw Dave do was he didn't have to be the guy that made everybody feel special, but he was the guy that challenged everybody to make everybody feel special. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he cultivated an atmosphere that was just absolutely beautiful to watch. And that's one of my favorite things to do now is introducing people and then bragging on them.
Pumping them up.
And because it just is like, I don't know, it just warms community up, and it gives that people a sense of like, oh, I belong here.
Yeah.
I belong here. Okay, and then the last one, which is, honor their parents, honor the mother or the father who's in the service, or if both of them are in the service, honor the parents in front of the kids. And this is the antidote to the thinking the sacrifice isn't worth it. Like somebody I see do this really well is Trevor Carpenter. He did. Do you remember him doing this with you?
I don't think so.
So it was super frustrating because he always beats me to the punch. But they were living here
in Virginia,
and we'd come up to visit them. And when we walked in, they had us over to their house, and him and his wife and his two daughters, and he grabbed me and he was like, he looked at you guys. He's like, okay, here's what I want you guys to know about your dad. Like, he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. And which was like not true. I know it's not true because Trevor's like incredibly connected. But what he's doing is he's honoring me in front of you. Now, how you do that with a person's kid, how does that kid now feel about that parent?
Really good.
Right?
I feel like it boils that family pride in you.
Yeah.
That's like, so fun fact. Well, I was downstairs earlier today and I was looking at the chapel picture frame.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, I should read a few. And it was just like, whoa.
Okay, let me tell what this is, okay? So when we would leave the chapel, the leaving chaplain would get a photo, and then the mat around the photo, all the families would sign their names or write a little note on that mat. And so in our home, it's probably, 24 by 14 or something like that. Sized image of like a watercolor of the chapel with all these signatures. So you were looking at
and I was just like, wow, like these people saw us do ministry.
Because it doesn't just say Chaplain Curtis. It says Curtis family.
So it hit different. I'm tearing up.
Why is that hitting you, do you think?
Okay, for those of you who don't know my dad, my dad views, so when the Lord put ministry in my dad's life, my dad makes it a family mission. It's not just a him and God mission, which I thought it was for the longest time when I was younger. Because I remember my dad like, I'm not going to make any family decisions if the Lord hasn't told me if that's right or not. Because at the time I wanted to adopt my best friend. And my dad's like, the Lord's not telling me to do that. I was like, dang it.
We prayed about it.
We did. And anyway, so I think over time, my dad has definitely been like, here's our family mission. My brother and I are still living at home. What are we going to do to make this community different? Whether you get reciprocated or not.
Yeah.
And I was just looking through all of the different signatures. It's like most of the people I don't know or like had never met. That's like, Milo, you're doing great. I'm like, yeah, that's my dad. His blood. Or then it's families that I babysat for. And they're like, your kids found ways to serve. Your family is doing amazing. I pray that I bless this family to go out and change the world or something like that. But I really do think that when people honor like their parents in front of you, it's like, my parents are doing something right. Now I know like who to listen to, and I view your parents differently. Yeah. So. And
I think and that's, again, that's the antidote to the sacrifice isn't worth it, right? Because there's a tremendous amount of, like when you read that. Yeah. I mean, that comes from a lot of folks that I didn't get home on time because I was in my office counseling them. Right. Or I was serving their commands. And it required that I be gone for extended periods of time or whatever it is. Okay, so just highlight. Let's kind of walk through these real quick. You want to remind us what the first one is?
For which one?
For how to honor military kids.
Oh, yeah. Offer words of encouragement, guys.
Yeah. Celebrate their success.
Yeah, invite them to belong.
and then honor their parents in front of them. And again, these will be the antidotes to that shame that wants to creep in. So, all right, we got was that good? Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
That was great.
Okay. So for those of you that are out there in the military, we hope that your kiddos are doing well. We want to see them succeed, and so feel free to reach out to us if there's any way we can support them. I want to highlight some folks that have left us some great feedback. I'm going to read these three. So this comes from that guy JT, and he put much needed reminder and support. He said, just started listening to the episode today. I think this is in reference to the Conviction podcast. He said, this is what God needed to show me today. This message, this reminder that God will give me the supplies and the equipment to reach the finish line. Not before the finish line, at the finish line. Jesus has my back, and this was an amazing reminder of that. Thank you. Looking forward to listening to other episodes soon. That's great.
Yeah.
And then you want to read the second one there?
Yeah. This is by Gavin
Gardner.
Oh, Gavin. Hey. So 360. He said, surprised and delighted. I'm a friend of Milo's from training in the Navy. I stopped just by to support a friend, and I was totally blown away. Pretty quickly, I realized I needed my Bible and had to get some notes. Well done. I can't wait to hear.
So, I hadn't heard from him in forever.
Really?
So this was a fantastic surprise. To hear from him, and then from Ben Spain. I think I know who this is. Somebody that we met while we were in Spain. He said, the personality mix you and Olivia impart is right on the money. The closest thing I compares to me is the widely popular weekly podcast by Dennis Prager and Julie Hartman, which I had never heard of. I knew who Dennis Prager was, and I started listening to that podcast. Great. And really interesting dynamics. Similar, different than what we're doing, but I can see why he's saying this.
Yeah.
Now that's running in pretty significant company, and your joint podcast is a must listen to social media for a parent and daughter son. It stimulates follow-on conversations, a win-win for everybody. Congrats and keep on going. So thank you to those folks. We're incredibly blessed to have, we're getting great reviews and ratings on Spotify and Apple Podcast. If you would like to rate or review this, what is stopping you?
Literally. Come on, guys.
Literally. You can follow, you can subscribe, do all of that today. In fact, do us a favor. Let others know that this is going on. Do me a favor today. Let 2 people you know, let them know about this podcast. Help us get the word out. By doing that,
encourage us.
Yeah, that'll be a massive encouragement to us. By doing that, you're gonna help us get the traction. Let others know what they can expect. You can also email us at hello@thisresilientsoul.com. We're always looking for ways to deepen the quality and expand the impact of this podcast. So if you have some ideas on how we can do that, we welcome your input. Yeah. Thanks for listening.